Rain struck the windows of the Bluebird Diner like handfuls of thrown gravel when the most dangerous man in Chicago walked through the door with blood beneath his coat. Jessica Hale noticed the blood before she noticed his face. It darkened the white cuff of his shirt, slid slowly over the side of his hand, and disappeared beneath the sleeve of a black wool coat that probably cost more than everything she owned. He entered without looking behind him, but something in the way he closed the door told her he knew exactly who was following. The diner was nearly empty. A truck driver slept over a cooling plate of eggs. 2 college students whispered in a corner booth. The cook had stepped outside for a cigarette, leaving Jessica alone beneath humming fluorescent lights and a flickering blue sign that painted the wet floor in cold neon. The stranger paused just inside the entrance. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, damp from the storm. His face was composed with the kind of stillness that did not belong to peaceful men. He scanned every window, every reflection, every possible exit. Then his gaze settled on Jessica. It did not move. For one long, unsettling moment, she felt as though the entire diner had fallen silent around them. She had spent most of her life being overlooked. Men glanced past her toward thinner women. Customers snapped their fingers without remembering her name. Even when she smiled, people often treated her kindness as something ordinary, something expected from a woman who wore an oversized blue uniform and tied her dark curls into a practical knot. But this man looked at her as though she were the only person in the room. Not with warmth. Not yet. With calculation. Jessica tightened her grip on the coffee pot. "You're bleeding." His eyes dropped briefly toward his hand. "So I am." His voice was low and calm, untouched by pain. Jessica glanced through the rain-streaked windows. Headlights passed on the road, but one black sedan slowed near the parking lot before continuing into the darkness. "You need a hospital." "No." That wasn't a question. Something shifted in his expression. It was not quite surprise. Perhaps no one spoke to him that way. He walked toward the last booth, the one with a clear view of both entrances, and sat with his back against the wall. "Coffee," he said. Jessica remained where she was. "You're going to stain the seat." His gaze traveled down to the blood on his coat, then back to her face. "I'll pay for it. You'll also pass out on my floor, and I'm not cleaning that up." One of the college students laughed nervously. The stranger turned his head. He did not say anything. The laughter stopped. Jessica felt the warning in the silence, but instead of backing away, she grabbed a clean dish towel from beneath the counter, crossed the diner, and dropped it onto the table in front of him. "Press that against your side. I asked for coffee, and I'm asking you not to die before I finish my shift." His eyes lifted to hers again. They were not black, as she had first thought, but a deep gray, almost silver beneath the fluorescent lights. There was coldness in them, intelligence, exhaustion, and something wounded that had nothing to do with the blood beneath his coat. Jessica turned over his cup and filled it. "Cream? No. Sugar? No. Pierre?" He looked at the glass case behind the counter. "What kind?" "Apple. Made this afternoon. I don't like sweets." "Then tonight can be your first bad decision." For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. It was not a smile, but it came close. Jessica cut him a generous slice, warmed it, and set it in front of him with a fork. He stared at the plate. "You do this for every wounded stranger?" "Only the rude ones." Outside, another set of headlights slowed. This time the car turned into the parking lot. The stranger's hand disappeared beneath his coat. Jessica saw the movement. She also saw the sudden change in him. The exhaustion vanished. The injured man disappeared. What remained was something controlled and lethal. "Get behind the counter," he said. Jessica's pulse stumbled. "Why?" "Now." The black sedan stopped near the entrance. 2 men stepped out beneath the rain. They wore dark jackets and moved without hesitation. The stranger rose from the booth. Jessica caught his wrist. He looked down at her hand as though no one had touched him without permission in years. "There's a back door through the kitchen," she whispered. His eyes returned to hers. "You don't know who I am?" "No. But I know those men didn't come for pie." The front door opened. The bell above it gave one bright, innocent chime. The first man entered with his hand beneath his jacket. Jessica stepped away from the stranger and raised her voice. "Kitchen's closed." The man ignored her. His eyes locked onto the booth. The stranger had disappeared. Jessica's heart hammered. The second man entered and moved toward the counter. "We're looking for someone." "So am I," Jessica said. My cook went out for a cigarette 20 minutes ago. The man's stare hardened. Tall man, black coat. Jessica picked up a rag and wiped the counter, forcing her hand not to shake. Half of Chicago owns a black coat. A noise came from the kitchen. Both men turned. The lights went out. The diner fell into darkness. Jessica heard movement, a muffled impact, a chair scraping violently across tile. Someone grabbed her around the waist. She inhaled to scream, but a familiar voice reached her ear. Quiet. The stranger pulled her down behind the counter as glass shattered near the front entrance. The college student screamed. The truck driver dropped to the floor. The stranger covered Jessica's head with one arm while another burst of glass fell across the counter. She felt his breath against her hair. Steady, controlled, almost impossibly calm. Then, a vehicle roared into the parking lot. Doors opened. Men shouted outside. The violence ended as quickly as it had begun. Emergency lights flickered on above the kitchen exit, bathing the diner in dim red. Jessica raised her head. The stranger was crouched beside her, one knee on the floor, his arm still around her shoulders. Blood now covered more of his shirt. Are you hurt? He asked. Jessica stared at him. You're asking me? Answer. No. Only then did his hand leave the back of her neck. The front door opened again. 3 men in tailored black suits entered. They did not look at the broken windows or the wounded attackers lying near the booths. They looked only at the stranger. One of them went pale. Mr. Vescari. Jessica felt the man beside her become perfectly still. The name meant nothing to her, but it meant everything to everyone else. The truck driver, now sitting against the wall, stared with open terror. One of the college students whispered something into the other's ear, and both turned white. The oldest of the suited men approached carefully. We thought Bellini's people had taken you. The stranger rose. When he did, the men lowered their eyes. Jessica remained behind the counter, surrounded by shattered glass and spilled coffee. Mr. Vescari looked down at her. His gaze lingered on her face as though memorizing it. Then he reached into his coat and placed a thick stack of bills beside the cash register. For the damage. Jessica stared at the money. That's too much. No, he said quietly. It isn't. One of his men opened the door. Cold rain blew into the ruined diner. Vescari stepped toward it, then stopped. He looked back at the untouched pie. Jessica. She froze. She had never told him her name. His eyes flicked toward the small metal badge pinned to her uniform. Keep the booth empty tomorrow night. Then he walked into the storm. By the time Jessica reached the broken window, 6 black SUVs had surrounded the diner. Men moved through the rain with umbrellas and lowered heads, forming a wall around him. In the center of them, Adrian Vescari turned once. Even through the downpour, his eyes found hers. And for reasons Jessica could not explain, she knew he would return. He came back the next night at exactly 11:43. The Bluebird diner had been repaired before sunset. New windows, new locks, new security cameras. Even the broken neon sign above the entrance had been replaced. Jessica's manager, Mr. Kaplan, claimed an anonymous insurance representative had handled everything. Jessica did not believe him. At 11:43, a black SUV stopped across the street. Adrian entered alone. No blood this time. No visible weapon. He wore a charcoal suit beneath his coat, perfectly tailored, his dark hair combed away from his face. He looked less like a wounded stranger and more like a man who owned the city beneath his shoes. Every customer noticed him. Jessica pretended not to. He sat in the same booth. She approached with her order pad. You're late. His eyes lifted. By how much? 3 minutes. I didn't realize I had an appointment. You told me to keep the booth empty. And did you? No one else likes this booth. The ceiling leaks. A drop of water struck the table between them. Adrian looked up, then back at her. Have it repaired. Jessica narrowed her eyes. It isn't your diner. No. But I dislike things that inconvenience you. She felt heat rise beneath her cheeks and immediately resented him for noticing. Coffee? Yes. Pierre? A pause. Yes. Jessica turned toward the counter. Warm. She looked back. He was watching her. Excuse me? The pie, he said. Warm. Something about the way he said it made her heart beat faster, as though he remembered every detail of the night before, as though it mattered. For the next week, Adrian returned every night. Always at the same time. Always in the same booth. Always alone inside. though Jessica began recognizing the dark vehicles parked at various points along the street. He never stayed fewer than 40 minutes. He rarely spoke about himself. He asked questions instead. How long had she worked at the diner? Why did she always take the night shift? Why did she rub her left wrist when she was tired? Why did she take leftover food home at the end of the night? Jessica answered selectively. She had learned not to confuse attention with kindness. "My niece likes the blueberry pancakes," she told him one evening. He stopped cutting his pie. "You have a child?" "My sister's daughter." "Where is your sister?" Jessica's hand tightened around the coffee pot. "Gone." Adrian noticed the change in her voice. He did not apologize. Men like him probably did not know how. But his questions stopped. The next night, a box of blueberry pancake mix from a famous gourmet shop appeared in the diner kitchen. Jessica carried it directly to his booth. "You need to stop buying things." "I didn't buy that. It arrived with 6 men in black coats." "Then perhaps they bought it." She set the box firmly on the table. "My niece doesn't need expensive pancakes." "What does she need?" The question caught her off guard. Jessica looked down. A stable home. A good school. Someone who doesn't disappear. Adrian leaned back in the booth. For a moment, the dangerous composure left his face. "What is her name?" "Emily." "How old?" 7. His gaze drifted toward the rain outside. "My mother disappeared when I was 8. Jessica had not expected the confession. "What happened?" She made the mistake of trusting the wrong man. His tone was emotionless. That made the words feel heavier. Jessica slid into the opposite side of the booth before she could stop herself. "Is that why you don't trust anyone?" Adrian looked at her. "I trust people to behave according to their nature." "That isn't trust." "No." "What is it?" "Survival." The diner seemed quieter around them. Jessica studied his face. He was handsome in the severe way of stone statues, sharp cheekbones, straight nose, a mouth that rarely softened. But it was not his face that unsettled her. It was the loneliness. It surrounded him even when his unseen guards surrounded the diner. "You recognized danger that first night?" he said. "I recognized men who wanted to hurt you, and you lied to them. I distracted them. You risked your life. I didn't have time to think. That is when people reveal who they are." Jessica glanced at his hands. There was a faint scar across one knuckle, another near his wrist. "And what did I reveal?" "That you are either very brave or very foolish." "Which one?" "I haven't decided." She smiled. Adrian stared at that smile, with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. His hand moved slightly across the table. For one suspended moment, she thought he might touch her. Instead, his fingers curled into his palm. "Go home early tonight," he said. Jessica frowned. "Why?" "Because a storm is coming." She looked toward the window. The weather report said light rain. "I wasn't speaking about the weather." At 2 in the morning, a man waited outside Jessica's apartment. She saw him before he saw her. He stood beneath the awning across the street, pretending to smoke while watching the entrance to her building. Jessica remained inside the cab. "Keep driving," she told the driver. "Ma'am?" "Please." As the taxi moved forward, the man stepped into the street. He raised a phone. Headlights appeared behind him. A black SUV turned sharply around the corner and blocked his path. 2 men emerged. The watcher ran. He made it half a block, before disappearing between parked vehicles. Jessica twisted in her seat. The driver glanced at her in the mirror. "You know those guys?" "No." But she knew the vehicle. She had seen it outside the diner every night. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Jessica answered without speaking. "Where are you?" Adrian asked. The calmness in his voice frightened her more than panic would have. "In a cab. Tell the driver to take the next right." "How did you get my number?" "Jessica. Someone was watching my apartment." "I know." The cab turned. A second black SUV waited near the curb. Adrian stood beside it in the rain. No umbrella. No coat. Only a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, as though he had left somewhere important without stopping to dress. The cab had barely stopped when he opened the door. "Get out." Jessica stayed where she was. "You knew." His jaw tightened. "Get out of the car." "You warned me before I left the diner. You knew someone would follow me." "I suspected." "And you used me to confirm it?" Silence. The answer was in his eyes. Jessica stepped out. Rain immediately dampened her hair. Adrian reached for her arm. She moved away. "Don't touch me." Something dangerous flickered across his face, but he did not close the distance. You cannot return to your apartment. My niece is inside. No, she isn't. Jessica went cold. What did you say? Emily was moved 30 minutes ago. The street seemed to tilt beneath her. Moved by whom? My people. You took her? I protected her. You kidnapped a 7-year-old child from her bed. I had a woman wake her. She was told there was a gas leak. Jessica slapped him. The sound cracked through the rain. The men near the SUVs went perfectly still. Adrian's face turned slightly from the force. He did not retaliate. He did not even lift a hand. He slowly looked back at her. Rain ran down his cheek. If she is frightened, she is safe. You had no right. No, he said. I didn't. The admission disarmed her, more than an argument would have. Adrian stepped closer, but still did not touch her. The man outside your building works for Stefan Orlov. Orlov controls the Eastern Port and 3 judges in this city. He does not send men to watch waitresses without a reason. I don't know anyone named Orlov. I believe you. Then why is he following me? That is what I intend to find out. Jessica stared at him. She had trusted him in fragments. A cup of coffee. A slice of pie. A quiet conversation after midnight. Now the truth stood between them in the rain. You're not a businessman, are you? Adrian's eyes held hers. No. What are you? The men around them seemed to disappear into silence. Adrian's voice lowered. The person men like Orlov fear. Jessica looked at the black vehicles, the armed shapes beneath expensive coats, the deference in every lowered gaze. Then she remembered the truck driver's terrified expression. Mr. Vescari. Her breath caught. She had heard the name before. Everyone in Chicago had. Vescari shipping companies, Vescari hotels, Vescari charities, and rumors whispered between news reports. Disappearances. Trials that collapsed. Men who entered restaurants and emptied entire rooms without speaking. You're him, she whispered. Adrian did not pretend not to understand. Yes. Jessica stepped back. For the first time since he entered the diner, she looked at him with fear. Adrian's expression did not change. But something in his eyes did. The fear did not anger him. It wounded him. Take me to Emily, Jessica said. He opened the SUV door. The Vescari safe house stood beyond the city on the edge of Lake Michigan, hidden behind iron gates and bare winter trees. It looked less like a house than a modern fortress built from glass, black stone, and silence. Jessica found Emily asleep in an upstairs bedroom beneath a pale yellow blanket, her stuffed rabbit tucked beneath one arm. A silver-haired woman named Rosa sat beside her. She was frightened for a few minutes, Rosa whispered. Then she asked whether the gas leak would cancel school. Jessica nearly collapsed with relief. She kissed Emily's forehead and remained beside the bed until the child's breathing became steady. When Jessica finally stepped into the hallway, Adrian stood at the far end near a wall of rain-darkened windows. He had changed into a black shirt. A faint red mark remained on his cheek. You could have told me the truth, Jessica said. You would have stopped speaking to me. You don't know that. I know how people react when they learn my name. You never gave me the chance. No. He did not defend himself. Jessica folded her arms. Why did you keep returning? Adrian looked through the glass toward the black lake. At first, because someone tried to kill me near your diner. That doesn't explain every night afterward. No. He turned toward her. The distance between them felt suddenly smaller. You didn't recognize me. You like that? I distrusted it. Why? Because everyone recognizes power. If they do not recognize the man, they recognize the danger around him. You did neither. I knew you were dangerous, but you brought me pie. Jessica almost smiled. She stopped herself. You could have chosen another diner. I did not want another diner. His voice was quiet, but the meaning beneath it was not. You watched me, she said. Yes. For how long? From the moment I left that first night. A chill moved through her. You had people follow me. I had people protect you. Without my permission. Yes. You keep saying that as though admitting it makes it acceptable? It does not. Then why do it? Adrian walked toward her slowly. Because the moment those men entered the diner, you became connected to me. My enemies would assume you saw something. They would assume I told you something. They would assume you mattered. Did I? He stopped an arm's length away. Jessica could hear the storm against the glass. Yes. The answer was too immediate, too honest. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, before returning to her eyes. You mattered before I understood why, he said. That was the problem. Jessica's heart beat painfully. Adrian raised one hand. His fingers came within an inch of her cheek. Then he stopped. His control seemed to cost him something. "You should sleep," he said. He lowered his hand. Jessica watched him walk away and realized she was more afraid of the gentleness he had denied himself than of the violence he carried so easily. By morning, the danger had spread beyond her apartment. Every television in the safe house showed the same image. A photograph of Jessica serving Adrian coffee at the Bluebird Diner. The picture had been taken through the window. The headline beneath it read, "Mystery woman linked to Vescari crime empire." Another photograph followed. Jessica leaving work. Jessica collecting Emily from school. Jessica shopping at a discount grocery store. Jessica standing beside her sister's grave. Her private life had become a public weapon overnight. Emily sat at the breakfast table, confused. "Why are you on television?" Jessica grabbed the remote and turned it off. Adrian entered moments later, with Marco Bellini beside him. Marco was elegant, silver-eyed, and only a few years younger than Adrian. Unlike the other men in the house, he smiled easily. "Jessica," he said, "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." She looked at Adrian. "You said she would be safe." "She is," Adrian replied. "My niece's face is on the news." It was blurred. "That is not the point." "No," he said. "It isn't." Marco placed a folder on the table. Someone leaked surveillance photographs to the press. Orlov is claiming Adrian used the diner to conduct illegal meetings. "That's ridiculous," Jessica said. "Truth is rarely the most valuable part of a public scandal," Marco replied. Jessica disliked him immediately. Not because he was rude, because he was charming in a house where everyone else appeared afraid. She opened the folder. Inside was a photograph of her late sister, Caroline, standing outside a hotel beside a man Jessica did not recognize. The date in the corner was 8 years earlier. "What is this?" Adrian watched her closely. "The man beside your sister was Daniel Orlov, Stefan Orlov's younger brother." Jessica shook her head. "Caroline never knew anyone named Orlov." "She did," Marco said. "She worked for him." "No. She worked as a hotel accountant, at a hotel owned through one of Orlov's shell companies." Jessica looked down at the photograph. Caroline appeared frightened. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she discovered money being moved through the hotel," Adrian said. "Payments to judges, police officers, city officials." She copied the records. Jessica felt the room narrowing. "My sister died in a car accident." Adrian's expression hardened. "No. She was killed." The words struck without mercy. Jessica gripped the table. Emily was still in the room. Rosa quietly guided the child toward the hallway, but Jessica could not move. She fell asleep at the wheel. The brake line was cut. Jessica looked at Adrian. "You knew this?" "I confirmed it last night." "Where are the records?" "We believe Caroline hid them before she died." Jessica's thoughts moved backward through years of grief. Caroline's fear during her final weeks. The phone calls she refused to explain. The small brass key she had pressed into Jessica's hand 2 days before the crash. "Keep this somewhere safe." Jessica had worn the key on a chain ever since. Her hand moved instinctively to her neck. Adrian saw. So did Marco. The room changed. "What does it open?" Adrian asked. Jessica covered the key beneath her sweater. "I don't know." Marco's smile disappeared. "Your sister gave it to you?" Jessica stared at him. "How did you know that?" A fraction of a second passed. "Too long." Adrian turned toward Marco. Marco recovered smoothly. It was an obvious conclusion. But Adrian continued looking at him. Something cold entered his face. "Leave us." Marco's jaw tightened. "Adrian." "Now." After Marco departed, Jessica stepped away from the table. "You brought me here because of the key." "No." "You knew my sister was connected to Orlov." "Not when I entered the diner. But later." "Yes." "And you kept coming back." Adrian did not answer quickly enough. Jessica's chest tightened. Every conversation replayed differently. His questions. His surveillance. His interest in Emily. Was any of it real? His eyes sharpened. "Do not ask me that." "Why?" "Because you don't like the answer?" "Because you already know it. I know you used me. I protected you. To find evidence. To keep you alive. Those are not the same thing." "No," he said, his restraint beginning to fracture. "They are not." Jessica pulled the chain from beneath her sweater. The small brass key gleamed between them. Adrian stared at it. "I don't know what it opens." she said. "But I would rather throw it into the lake than give it to a man who lied to me every night." His face became unreadable. "You think I sat in that diner for a key? I think you're capable of anything." "Yes." The answer was calm. Brutal, but not that. She wanted to believe him. That was what frightened her most. Jessica returned upstairs and locked the bedroom door. For 3 days, the storm trapped them at the lake house. Snow replaced rain, erasing the road beyond the gates. Adrian kept his distance. He conducted meetings behind closed doors, his voice quiet enough that Jessica never heard him raise it. Yet men entered his office confident and left pale. At night, she sometimes saw him standing alone on the terrace without a coat, staring at the frozen shoreline. He did not come near her. He did not ask for the key. His restraint became its own form of pressure. On the 4th night, the power failed. Emergency lights illuminated the hall in red. Jessica woke to the sound of breaking glass below. Then gunfire. Rosa rushed into the bedroom. "We have to move." Emily began to cry. Jessica wrapped her in a coat and followed Rosa toward a hidden staircase behind the closet. Before they reached it, the bedroom door opened. Adrian stood there with blood on his collar. "Come with me." "Where?" "The east tunnel is compromised." Another explosion shook the house. Adrian crossed the room and lifted Emily into his arms. The child clung to his neck. "You promised we were safe," Jessica said. His gaze met hers over Emily's shoulder. "I was wrong." It was the first time she had heard fear in his voice. Not fear for himself. For them. He led Jessica through a narrow service corridor as smoke rolled across the ceiling. 2 guards followed, but when they reached the lower stairwell, bullets struck the wall. Adrian turned instantly, covering Emily with his body. Jessica saw him fire once into the darkness. A man fell near the doorway. She flinched. Adrian looked at her. There was no apology in his face, only a terrible certainty. "This is what I am," he said. The house burned behind them as they escaped through a maintenance tunnel opening near the lake. Snow whipped across the frozen grounds. A black SUV waited beneath the trees. Halfway there, Jessica heard a sharp impact. Adrian staggered. He nearly dropped to one knee but kept Emily secured against his chest. "You've been hit. Keep moving." Blood spread across his shoulder. Jessica took Emily from him. Adrian remained between them and the burning house, walking backward through the snow while his men returned fire toward shadows near the trees. The visual burned itself into Jessica's mind. The most feared man in Chicago standing alone beneath a white storm, blood darkening his shirt, refusing to turn his back while she carried the child he had risked everything to protect. When they reached the SUV, Adrian collapsed against the door. Jessica caught him. For one disorienting second, his full weight rested against her. His face was inches from hers. "Do not let them take you," he whispered. "Who?" His bloodied hand closed around hers. "Marco." Then, he lost consciousness. The safe house in Milwaukee was hidden beneath an abandoned church. From the outside, St. Augustine's appeared condemned, its stone walls blackened by age, and its stained glass windows covered in boards. Below the sanctuary, however, lay a network of rooms equipped with medical supplies, surveillance monitors, and enough weapons to start a war. Adrian's doctor removed the bullet from his shoulder, while Jessica waited outside the operating room. Marco had disappeared during the attack. So had nearly a dozen Vescari guards. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fracture running through Adrian's entire empire. At dawn, Jessica stood in the abandoned sanctuary above the safe house. Snowlight filtered through cracks in the boarded windows. The altar was covered in dust. Adrian entered silently behind her. His left arm rested in a sling, but the injury did nothing to diminish his presence. "You should be in bed," Jessica said. "So should you. Emily is sleeping." "I know." Of course he knew. He seemed to know every movement in every room. Jessica turned toward him. "You warned me about Marco before you collapsed." "Yes." "How long have you suspected him?" "Since he recognized your key." "Why didn't you confront him?" "Because suspicion is not proof." "And now?" "Now he tried to kill a child." The temperature in the church seemed to fall. "What will you do?" Adrian's expression answered before his voice did. "What is necessary?" Jessica looked away. "You killed someone in front of me." He was aiming at Emily. "I know. I would do it again." "I know that too." He approached until only a few feet remained between them. "You are afraid of me." "Yes." He absorbed the answer, without moving. "But I'm also afraid when you're not near us," she admitted. Something changed in his face. Jessica hated how vulnerable the confession made her feel. You lied to me, she continued. You watched me. You moved my niece without asking. You turned my life into something I don't recognize. Yes, but when the house was burning, you carried her. I would have carried both of you if I could. The words landed with quiet force. Jessica looked at his injured shoulder. You nearly died. That possibility did not concern me. It concerned me. Adrian went still. The space between them became charged with everything they had not said. He raised his uninjured hand. This time his fingers touched her cheek. Barely. His thumb moved across her skin with a tenderness that seemed impossible from a man whose hands had ended lives. Jessica did not pull away. Tell me to stop, he said. His voice was lower than she had ever heard it. She should have. Instead, she placed her hand against his wrist. Adrian leaned toward her. Their foreheads almost touched. Then a phone rang below the sanctuary. The moment broke. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, as though restraining something violent. When he stepped away, the coldness had returned. A guard rushed into the church. We found Bellini. Adrian turned. Where? The Bluebird Diner. Jessica's blood chilled. He's waiting for her. The diner looked exactly as it had the night Adrian first entered. Rain on the windows. Blue neon across the tile. The same final booth beneath the leaking ceiling. Except now the doors were locked, the customers gone, and Marco Bellini sat alone with a cup of coffee he had not touched. Jessica watched through a surveillance feed from inside a black SUV parked 2 blocks away. Adrian stood beside her. No, she said. No what? You are not going in there alone. Yes, I am. He asked for me, which is why you will remain here. Jessica faced him. You still believe you can command every decision I make. I can when the alternative is your death. That isn't protection. It's control. With you, the distinction has become irrelevant. Not to me. Adrian's jaw tightened. Jessica removed the brass key from her neck. I know what it opens. He looked down at it. My sister left a safe deposit receipt inside Emily's baby book. I found it when Rosa brought our things from the apartment. Which bank? Not a bank. The old Union Station luggage vaults. Adrian understood immediately. The station had been renovated years earlier, but its underground storage corridors still existed beneath the city. Marco knows, Jessica said. That's why he chose the diner. He wants me to lead him to it. You are not going. He'll never believe you know where the evidence is. I don't need him to believe me. You need him to confess. Adrian stared at her. She held his gaze. You taught me something, Jessica said. People reveal who they are when they don't have time to think. He stepped closer. You are using my own words against me. Yes. I dislike it. I know. His eyes moved over her face, filled with anger, fear, and a devotion he still refused to name. If anything happens to you, you'll burn down the city? No. His hand closed around hers. The city would be the beginning. Jessica entered the diner at 11:43. Marco smiled when the bell chimed above the door. You came alone. No, I didn't. His eyes moved toward the windows. Adrian is nearby. He always is. Marco gestured toward the opposite side of the booth. Jessica remained standing. You took photographs of me. I ordered them taken. You leaked them. Yes. You killed my sister? Marco's expression softened with false regret. Caroline was offered a chance to return what she stole. She had a child. So do many people who make poor decisions. Rage sharpened Jessica's fear into clarity. And Adrian? Marco leaned back. Adrian was supposed to die the first night he entered this diner. Jessica glanced toward the booth, where she had served him pie. You sent him here. I arranged for him to receive information about an emergency meeting nearby. Orlov's men handled the rest. Why? Because he had become weak. Jessica almost laughed. You tried to assassinate the most powerful man in Chicago because he ate pie? Marco's smile vanished. He built an empire by making decisions without emotion. Then he began changing routes because your shift ended at 2. He cancelled meetings to sit in that booth. He ordered 20 men to guard a waitress who did not know his name. Jessica's heart pounded. He was distracted, Marco continued. Predictable. For the first time in his life, he could be controlled. So you used me. No, he did that himself. A dark vehicle stopped outside. Marco noticed it. You have the key? Jessica held up the chain. I want Emily removed from every list, every photograph, every threat. You are not in a position to negotiate. I am the only person who knows where the records are. Marco stood. Two men emerged from the kitchen. Jessica's breath caught. Take me to them, Marco said. The front windows exploded inward. Adrian entered through the rain before the glass finished falling. He wore a black coat over his injured shoulder, one hand raised, his expression terrifyingly calm. Behind him, dark figures surrounded the diner. Marco grabbed Jessica and pressed a weapon against her side. Adrian stopped. His eyes moved to Jessica's face. Not to the weapon. Not to Marco. Only to her. You should have stayed in the vehicle, he said. Jessica almost cried from the absurdity of it. I told you I make my own decisions. And consistently dangerous ones. Marco tightened his arm around her. This is touching. Adrian's gaze shifted toward him. The entire diner seemed to shrink beneath the force of that look. You burned my house, Adrian said. You built another. You frightened a child. A necessary pressure point. No. Adrian's voice became almost gentle. That was the mistake that ends you. Marco laughed once. You still think this is about loyalty? Half your captains are mine. Orlov controls the port. The police commissioner has already signed the warrants that will dismantle what remains of your family. Then why are you hiding behind a waitress? Marco's face tightened. Adrian took one step forward. The weapon pressed harder against Jessica. Stop, she whispered. Adrian stopped instantly. Marco noticed. Triumph entered his eyes. You see, he said. One word from her, and the great Adrian Vescari obeys. Adrian did not deny it. Yes. Jessica stared at him. Rain blew through the shattered windows, moving the dark strands of hair across his forehead. He looked injured, exhausted, and more dangerous than any man she had ever seen. But there was no shame in his admission. Only certainty. Marco's grip shifted. That was all Jessica needed. She drove her heel down onto his foot and threw her weight sideways. The weapon discharged into the ceiling. Adrian crossed the distance before Marco recovered. He struck him once. The impact sent Marco across the booth table. The two men from the kitchen raised their weapons, but Adrian's guards flooded the diner. Within seconds, the room fell silent. Marco lay on the floor with blood at the corner of his mouth. Adrian stood over him. Jessica saw the decision forming in his face. Adrian. He looked at her. Don't. Marco laughed from the floor. She still thinks you can be saved. Adrian's eyes returned to him. No, Jessica said. I think killing him here is what he expects. Adrian's jaw flexed. He murdered your sister, and I want the world to know it. She stepped closer. I want him to watch everything he built collapse. For a long moment, Adrian did not move. Then he lowered his hand. Sirens sounded in the distance. Marco's expression changed. You called the police? Jessica reached inside her coat and revealed the small recording device Adrian's men had secured beneath the fabric. Not the police. She looked toward the news vans turning into the parking lot behind the approaching federal vehicles. The press. The evidence beneath Union Station was more devastating than anyone expected. Caroline had copied 8 years of financial records connecting Orlov businesses, corrupt judges, city officials, and mafia families across 4 states. Marco's name appeared throughout them. So did Adrian's father's. Adrian himself was not innocent. His empire had been built on violence, fear, and money that had passed through men whose crimes no court had ever proven. The records could destroy everything bearing the Vescari name. In the underground vault, Jessica stood beside him as he turned the final pages. Adrian's face revealed nothing. What happens now? She asked. If these are released, Orlov loses his protection. Marco spends the rest of his life behind glass. 3 families collapse. And you? I lose the ports, the casinos. Most of the legitimate companies will be seized while investigators separate them from the rest. You could destroy the records. Yes. He held the file in one hand. Jessica watched him. Will you? Adrian looked at the boxes containing the empire his family had built across generations. Then he took out his phone. Send everything, he told the man on the other end. Federal prosecutors. Every major network. Every account. He ended the call. Jessica stared at him. You're giving it all away. No. He stepped toward her. I am choosing what remains. The first arrests began before sunrise. Orlov was taken from his penthouse. Police commissioners resigned. Judges were removed from their homes in handcuffs. Marco survived the diner and was transferred under federal guard to a hospital where cameras captured every second of his humiliation. The Vescari organization fractured. Some men fled. Others attempted to seize control. For 6 violent weeks, Chicago trembled beneath the collapse of an empire. Adrian sent Jessica and Emily to a hidden house along the Maine coast. He did not go with them. That hurt more than Jessica expected. He called each night, but never stayed on the phone longer than a few minutes. He asked whether Emily had eaten, whether the heating worked, whether Jessica had slept. He never told her where he was. One night, Jessica stood beside the storm-darkened ocean with the phone against her ear. "You're hurt," she said. "Silence. How do you know? You're breathing differently." "It is nothing. That is what you said the first night." A wave struck the rocks below. "Come here," she whispered. "I can't." "Why?" "Because men are still dying for the name I gave them. You gave up the empire. Not all of them accepted the decision. And you think staying away protects me?" "Yes, it doesn't. Jessica, every night I wait for your call. Every night I wonder whether it will be the last one. You made yourself part of my life, Adrian. You don't get to disappear from it and call that protection." His breathing became quieter. "I do not know how to be the man you deserve. I never asked for a different man. You should. I asked you to come here." The line remained silent for so long that she thought the call had ended. Then he said, "Go inside." "Why?" "Because it's cold." Jessica turned. A black SUV waited at the end of the driveway. Adrian stood beside it beneath the storm. He looked thinner. A healing cut marked his temple. His black coat moved in the ocean wind. Jessica lowered the phone. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Emily burst through the front door behind her. "Adrian!" The little girl ran across the wet grass. Adrian knelt despite the mud and caught her with both arms. His eyes closed as she hugged him. Jessica watched the most feared man she had ever known hold a child as though she was something sacred. When Emily finally returned inside, Adrian remained near the cliff. Jessica approached slowly. "You came. You told me to. You usually ignore what people tell you." "Not you." The storm moved around them. He looked toward the ocean. "The remaining Vescari captains have accepted new leadership. The criminal businesses have been divided or abandoned. The hotels will survive. The shipping company may not. And you? I am no longer useful to the men who once followed me." "That wasn't my question." Adrian looked at her. "Who are you now?" He seemed uncertain for the first time since she had known him. "I don't know." Jessica stepped closer. "You're the man who entered a diner bleeding and complained about warm pie." "I did not complain. You said you didn't like sweets." "I was wrong. You're the man who terrified every customer but tipped enough to rebuild the windows. They were poor windows." "You're the man who watched me without permission." His face hardened slightly. "Yes." "Moved my niece without asking." "Yes." "Nearly died carrying her through the snow." His gaze dropped. "Yes." "And destroyed his own empire because my sister deserved justice." Adrian looked at her again. "I did it because you would never have looked at me the same way if I burned those records." "So it was selfish?" "Entirely." Jessica smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. "That might be the first normal thing you've ever said?" Adrian's hand rose toward her face. This time he did not stop before touching her. His palm rested against her cheek. "I thought staying away would weaken this," he said. "This?" "The part of me that cannot think when you are in danger. The part that hears your voice in every silent room. The part that walks into diners expecting to see you, even when I know you are hundreds of miles away." Jessica's breath trembled. "That sounds inconvenient." "It is unbearable." "Good." His thumb moved beneath her eye, catching a tear. "You should be furious with me." "I am." "You should fear me." "Sometimes I do." "You should choose a safer man." Jessica placed both hands against his coat. "A safer man wouldn't have noticed the ceiling leaked over my booth." Adrian's expression broke. "Not completely, but enough." The coldness left his eyes. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "The truth. You have it." "Not all of it." He went still. Jessica held his gaze. "Tell me why you kept returning." The storm seemed to wait with her. Adrian looked toward the distant lights of the house, where Emily's small silhouette moved behind a window. Then he looked back at Jessica. "The first night, you saw blood and offered me coffee. You saw danger and showed me a door. You saw men fear me and still argued about the price of a window." His voice lowered. "For years, every person who approached me wanted something. Money, protection, power, survival. You wanted me to eat pie before it became cold." Jessica felt tears spill freely now. Adrian moved closer. I returned the second night because I needed to know whether you were real. I returned the third because you smiled when you saw me. By the fourth, I had memorized the sound of your footsteps. By the fifth, I had rearranged every meeting I controlled. His forehead touched hers. By the sixth, I knew anyone who harmed you would not live long enough to regret it. That is not romantic. No. It's terrifying. Yes. Jessica's fingers tightened against his coat. And the seventh night? Adrian's eyes held hers. By the seventh night, I understood I would walk into that diner for the rest of my life, if it meant you would look at me as though I were only a man waiting for coffee. Jessica kissed him. For one startled heartbeat, Adrian did not move. Then his arms surrounded her. There was nothing careful about the way he pulled her against him. Yet his mouth touched hers with astonishing restraint, as though even now he feared taking something she had not freely given. Jessica rose against him, closing the distance. The restraint broke. His hand moved into her hair. His other arm tightened around her waist, holding her against the storm, the ocean, and every violent road that had brought them there. When they finally separated, Adrian kept his forehead against hers. "You are not allowed to disappear again," Jessica whispered. "I won't. You don't move children without permission." "Agreed. You don't put surveillance on me." "A pause. Adrian. I will reduce it." She pulled back. He almost smiled. "No surveillance," she said. "Visible security. We'll negotiate." "I do not negotiate when you are concerned. You do now." His eyes darkened with something intimate and possessive. "This will be difficult. I know. You may regret it. Probably. I have enemies. Fewer than before. I am not gentle. You are with Emily. That is different. You're gentle with me." His gaze dropped to her mouth. "Not always." Heat spread through her despite the cold. Adrian drew her back beneath his coat as rain began to fall. A year later, the Bluebird Diner reopened beneath a new name. Caroline's. Jessica refused to let Adrian buy the building outright, so he purchased the mortgage company instead and reduced the interest rate until she discovered what he had done. Their argument lasted 2 days. His apology arrived in the form of a legally binding document, transferring the property into a trust controlled by Jessica and Emily. The diner became famous after the trials. Tourists came hoping to sit in the booth where Adrian Vescari had first seen the waitress who brought down a criminal alliance. Jessica disliked the attention. Adrian disliked strangers occupying his booth. So every night at 11:43, the final booth remained empty. One snowy evening, Jessica finished serving the last customer and looked toward the window. A black SUV waited across the street. It no longer frightened her. Adrian entered as the bell chimed above the door. He wore a dark overcoat dusted with snow. His former empire had become a legitimate security and shipping company, smaller than what he once controlled but entirely his. Men still feared him. Judges still lowered their voices when speaking his name. But Emily made him attend school plays. Rosa ordered him to remove his coat at dinner, and Jessica regularly told him when he was being unreasonable. He crossed the diner and sat in the same booth. Jessica approached with coffee. "You're late." "By how much?" 2 minutes. I was outside. "Watching me?" "Waiting for you to notice me." She filled his cup. "Cream?" "No." "Sugar?" "No." "Pierre?" He looked at her. "Always." Jessica placed a warm slice of apple pie in front of him. Adrian caught her wrist before she could walk away. He did not grip hard. He never did. From his coat pocket, he removed a small velvet box. Jessica stared at it. The remaining customers fell silent. Adrian stood. For a man who had faced gunfire without flinching, he looked almost uncertain. Almost. He opened the box. Inside was a ring set with a deep blue stone the color of the diner's neon lights on the night they met. "I have owned buildings, companies, ports, and men's loyalty," he said. "I believed possession was the same as security." Jessica's eyes filled. It was not. He took her hand. "You are the first person I have ever loved without knowing how to control the outcome." The diner remained completely silent. Adrian lowered himself onto one knee. The most feared man in America knelt on the tile floor where he had once hidden with a bleeding wound and held Jessica's hand as though the entire world depended on her answer. "You gave me coffee when I was a stranger," he said. "You gave me mercy when I did not deserve it. You gave me a home after I destroyed the only life I understood." His voice became quieter. "Marry me, Jessica." She looked down at him, at the man beneath the name, at the dangerous, impossible stranger who had walked into her ordinary life and never taken his eyes off her again. "You'll have to share the booth," she said. "With whom?" "Me." Adrian's mouth softened. "Always." Jessica said yes. Outside, snow covered the street, gathering on the roofs of the black SUVs and softening the city's hardest edges. Inside, customers applauded. Emily ran from the kitchen and wrapped her arms around both of them. Adrian rose, pulling Jessica and the child into his embrace. For the first time in his life, the men stationed outside were not guarding an empire. They were guarding a family. Much later, after the diner had emptied and the lights had been dimmed, Jessica sat across from Adrian in the final booth. Her ring caught the blue glow from the restored neon sign. Adrian watched her over his coffee. He still looked at her the same way he had on that first stormy night, as though every other person in the world had disappeared. Jessica reached across the table. This time, when his hand moved toward hers, he did not stop. Their fingers intertwined beside two empty plates and the last crumbs of warm apple pie. The ceiling above them no longer leaked. The windows were whole. The storm had passed. But Adrian Vescari never stopped returning to the booth where an ordinary woman had looked at a monster, seen a wounded man, and served him kindness without asking for anything in return. And Jessica never again believed she was invisible. Not to him. Never to him.